5 years ago, I left the comfort of my corporate job, the one that I had worked so hard for so long, to start my business consulting company. It's been an incredible journey. It's been full of uncertainty, full of growth, some amazing relationships, and certainly a lot of purpose. So today, I wanted to share in this episode three key lessons I've learned along this 5 year journey. Lessons that I believe will resonate with anyone that's building something meaningful, whether it be in their life or in their career.
This is the Champion Forum podcast with Jeff Hancher, the forum for leaders, champions, and dreamers.
Hey, welcome back, everybody. Man, it is so hard to believe that it has been 5 years that have passed since I made that bold decision on December 13th of 2019 to leave the corporate job that I loved. And this was a job that also gave me plenty of stability, gave me a life, quite frankly, that I didn't even think was possible. I wasn't running from that job. I loved the company, I loved the culture, and I think there was even some upside in my career trajectory. But man, it was a daunting leap, and it has been a ride that I had no idea what was in store. If you would have told me, looking back now over the last 5 years, this is how it's going to play out, I don't even know if I would have believed it because, man, there have been plenty of valleys. There's been some good views on the mountaintop as well. But what has been consistent is change and venturing into the unknown. I have learned so much on this journey, but as I reflect, I wanted to share with you, the audience, the listener, three lessons that I have valued immensely, that I believe they truly do apply to leaders, they apply to entrepreneurs, and quite frankly, anybody that's striving to grow and get through where they're at now to where they want to be. And so, look, I could probably tell you 100 lessons I've learned in the last 5 years and what not to do and what to do more of. But these certain things that I'm going to talk about, I truly believe they're staples and they apply to all of us. And the first lesson that I want to talk about that I've learned on this 5 year journey so far is embrace uncertainty. Man, if there's one thing that I have learned about being an entrepreneur, it's that there's no guarantees. What happened yesterday might not happen tomorrow. The thing that you were thinking was going to happen wasn't going to happen. What you thought it was going to cost, it's going to cost a lot more, whatever it might be. But here's what I think we can all agree on. Growth happens outside of your comfort zone. Uncertainty, it's not a sign that you're on the wrong path. It's often the hallmark of meaningful progress and a great new beginning. This uncertainty along this path has typically always been a catapult or a catalyst into the next thing, the next piece of growth on my story, on my journey. And look, this uncertainty even started even before I was on the entrepreneurial journey. I remember contemplating, hey, am I going to leave this job? Am I going to start this business? What if I do? What if I don't? Is this a foolish decision? But look how good it could be. I was under this immense amount of pressure. I remember being on the tarmac in Atlanta on the airport on the runway. We're getting ready to take off. I'm contemplating this big decision, this big move. Are you crazy? What if you don't? YOLO. I got all of this going through my mind, and I just become so stressed. I could feel my chest tightening. I could feel myself starting to sweat. Now I'm starting to sweat profusely. Now I'm starting to get nauseous. I don't know if I'm going to throw up. I don't know what's going to happen. And I remember getting out of my seat and heading towards the bathroom, and I'm hearing, flight attendants yelling at me because, look, we weren't even at a cruising altitude yet. We were still not far from the runway on our takeoff, but I am sick and I can't stay here. Next thing I know, I wake up in the aisle to have ice packs on me and people all around me asking me if I was okay. To my response, I said, well, I feel a lot better now. I felt this relief. But I asked them, what happened? And they said, sir, you passed out in the aisle and had a minor seizure. And I'm like, what? What is going on? Now I'm concerned for my health. I go to the doctor for them just to tell me it's stress induced. I learned that you have a thing called a vagus nerve, and mine was grossly inflamed. And if I didn't get a control of this thing, it could cause a lot of damage to my body. So they recommended that I make a decision. Boy, was there some uncertainty in making this decision. So much so that, I passed out on an airplane and thought I was going to throw up or, who knows, poop my pants. I don't know what was going to happen, but nothing good was coming out of this. So you want to talk about a little bit of uncertainty? There was uncertainty in making the leap. It's not for the faint of heart. But man, it didn't stop there. It started even early. I didn't really know what I was getting into. I just knew where my passions were. I knew how I wanted to serve people. I knew that I had something inside of me that was a gift that I had to get out to the world. And I knew I was absolutely passionate about it. But you know what I didn't know? I didn't know how to invoice people. Like, what kind of entrepreneur am I? I didn't even think through this. How are we going to make financial transactions? And look, I'm going to get real vulnerable, and this is going to really encourage somebody listening. The first few times that I started, whether it was like giving a talk or even starting with executive coaching, and people would be like, so how do we go about, what's your payment systems? Now, look, I know my way around the conversation, and I'm like, payment systems, I can't tell them I don't know what I'm talking about. And you know what I said to somebody? This is a true story. I can't make this up. I said, oh, you can Venmo me. And they looked at me like, Venmo? Like, you want me to Venmo you the money? Yeah. And I would play it off like, we're still in the, setup stage and startup. So, yeah, you can just Venmo me or you can pay me in cash. And it's like, what are we doing? What is this about? You want to hear something embarrassing? I didn't even know what QuickBooks was. I didn't even know that there were these payment systems. You would think I would have done a little bit of research on this up front. Thank goodness I found somebody that was like, yeah, I can help you get some of that set up. But can you believe this? I had no clue. People were paying me literally in 20s, like I'd go to an event or speak and they're like, how do you want me? Well, you can Venmo me or cash. Well, I don't have Venmo, but I can stop by the ATM machine and get some cash. What are we doing here? This is crazy. Talk about uncertainty. Talk about, I don't know where I'm going. But this was like flavor of the month. I mean, look, you all remember our great friend Lem. He was the co-host of the show for a couple of years. I think I've gone on record on this show enough to let you all know. I don't know how anything in the studio works. There's wires all over the place. There's lighting. There's cameras. There's microphones. There's all of this stuff that goes on that I know very little to nothing about. And Lem was transitioning out as the producer, and I'm like, I have no idea. Is this the end of the show? I don't know what I'm doing. I don't know what's going on. But you know what? As devastating as that moment was that Lem was transitioning from the show, if that would have never happened, I would have never met Brad, who's sitting right here next to me, who's been in this studio, has seen hundreds of episodes, I think, at this point, come through. And has been such a tremendous support to the show, and we have a relationship. So what am I saying here? Uncertainty isn't always bad. It's not always a bad thing. What seems like a closed door sometimes can oftentimes be an open door. I remember starting our executive mastermind. Man, you want to talk about, I don't know what I'm doing. What I knew was I didn't have time to do one-on-one coaching as much anymore. And so a friend of mine told me, hey, you should start a virtual group for just executives. I didn't know how to do that, but my good buddy, I hope you're listening, David McLennan, he showed me the ropes. He told me about, this Kajabi software and how you can tie that to your point of sale and how it can be recurring and now how to recruit that and how to build that. Now we have, I think we're pushing over 40 members of the executive mastermind. But that first executive mastermind call, what a disaster that was. I sent people the wrong Zoom links. People didn't know how to log on. It was an absolute mess. Thank goodness that there was only 4 of us on the first call, and I think 2 of them were people I planted there so that it wasn't, silly that there was just 3 people on the call. I didn't know what I was doing. But look at the mastermind now. That uncertainty of starting, taking that leap, learning from some of those setbacks and failures helped catapult me into what the mastermind is today. How about going to the Book in a Weekend event and writing my first book? I never thought in a million years that I would ever get selected to be at the event with the likes of John Maxwell and Tim Elmore and Mark Cole and some of these just amazing people in the room. Don Yeager, that's how I met Don. Not only did I think I would never get in the room, but then they accept my application. Now here comes imposter syndrome. What am I going to do? Now I'm in this room. Now I got to figure out what kind of a book I'm going to write and what's my book pitch going to be. Should I just not go? I'm not going to win anyway. Not to mention the cost of this is so much. Uncertainty. I'm uncertain. You seen the theme here? There's a lot of uncertainty in this journey. But if I wouldn't have pushed through that, I would have never won the contest, and I would not be having a book published with the endorsement of John Maxwell. How about hiring your first employee? My gosh, I remember hiring the first full-time employee. I would stay up at night thinking about how are we going to make this work? Can I do this? Can I even afford to do this? Do we really need this just yet? I'm not certain. And I had to wrestle through those tensions. And look, the list goes on and on and on. It's full of it. But here's what the thing is with this. Uncertainty forces you to innovate. It makes you adapt. It builds resilience. So my challenge to you is this. Instead of fearing it, view it as an opportunity for transformation, because that is absolutely an opportunity. Here's a few ideas that I have made into habits that you can do the next time that you're faced with this uncertainty, because most likely you will be if you're making progress. The first thing is reframe the fear that you're feeling. You will absolutely have fear on this journey. The next time that you feel paralyzed by uncertainty, ask yourself, what is the worst that could happen? That's my go-to. That's my go-to question that I ask myself. What's the worst that could happen? Then identify what you can do to mitigate the risk. Because on this journey, there is risk, there is fallout. But what's the worst that could happen? It'll help isolate that fear as not being that bad. The other thing that you can do is experiment and learn a little bit. Because we know that we can learn from failing and we can learn from setbacks. Take one small step into the unknown this week. Try something maybe that you've been thinking about, but fear has held you back. It might be pitching a bold idea to an investor or a big prospect, maybe trying a new strategy for your company or business, or pursuing a project that scares you a little bit, like me going to the book competition, or like me doing the very first mastermind call. And the other thing is this, celebrate failure. And I mean celebrate it. And it's hard to do in the moment. And you can't, I don't know. I'm not wired to celebrate failure in the moment. But after some time passes, I can look back on it. Reflect on a time you took a risk and it didn't work out. What did you learn from it? I guarantee you learned something from it. Share that story with somebody. Celebrate it a little bit. It will remind you of the growth that came from the discomfort. A lot of my keynotes are around stories of setbacks and adversity that I have faced in my life. Because not only did they teach me, but now they're teaching hundreds of other people of what not to do. You know, in this journey, I remember I needed more sales. I needed more revenue. I was having a hard time with outbound sales, prospecting, and strategy. And look, I pride myself in being pretty good at sales, but I couldn't get the traction. So I decided I'm going to vet out a sales consulting company. And I find the one that I think is going to be pretty good. And they said, look, for $9,000, we can get this ship sailing. And I said, you know what? I'm a little hesitant, but let's do it. I paid $9,000 for this LinkedIn campaign and this AI thing and all this stuff to generate leads. You know how many leads I got from that $9,000? Zero. None. Not one lead. Forget about a sale. I didn't even get a lead. I didn't even get an opportunity to present my goods and services to anybody, but I'm down $9,000. That's a lesson learned. You would have think like I would have asked for references, something like that. But it was in this lesson that I knew, you know what? Here's what I'm going to do different next time. Second lesson that I've learned in these 5 years: build meaningful relationships. Success is not a solo journey. It is not. Relationships with clients, maybe a colleague or a peer, definitely your mentors. These are the foundations for growth. And these are definitely the foundations for sustainability. There are people out there that have been where you want to go. These kind of relationships, vendor relationships, oh my gosh, I have the most amazing contractors and vendors that are doing things that I have no clue how to do. Meaningful relationships are about authenticity. They're about trust. They're about mutual value, not just taking from people, but how can we win together? How can I help you win? They are investments that pay dividends in both professional and personal fulfillment. There's many examples of this in my 5-year journey. I think of Mike Weinberg. You know, Mike Weinberg was a guy that I was chasing down to be on the show. I just wanted this sales expert, this book bestseller guy, just to be on the show and drop some knowledge to me and all of you. Well, I got him on the show, and that turned out to be me going on a business trip with him to Chicago, to now, you know, I carry his cell phone number in my phone, and he's become a great friend and a great mentor. Who would have thought? I think of David McLennan. I would have never started the Executive Mastermind without David. What a great mentor. This is a guy that is ahead of me in the journey. He has built successful businesses. He's in my very own space. A guy that doesn't see me as a competitor, but he sees what's on the inside of me and wants to help. I think of Abigail Condon. You know, this whole thing started with Abigail. If you don't know, Abigail is the one that sat right next to me and helped me write this book that's coming out June 17th. And there's a story behind why her writing the book. You know, when I started this podcast, I launched an Instagram page for the very first time, was never on Instagram. And I would start posting pictures or whatnot, and I would be putting my little captions in there. And Abigail would text me and say, you spelled a word wrong, your grammar's off. And I'm like, I was grateful, but I'm like, gosh, you know, this is not my sweet spot. So you know what? She volunteered to help. And she's been literally with me almost every day of this journey. This turned her into being the copywriter of our company. She's the one that's responsible for all the show notes, the weekly emails, and now has even sat in the chair next to me as we have written my very first book. John Warren, man, what a guy. Many of you have saw the post out there just a few weeks back. We lost John Warren tragically. He passed away. But man, what a game changer for our business. You know how I met John, or I should say how he became part of the team. This is how desperate I was. One day on my Instagram story, I put up just a couple sentences looking for somebody that understands video editing and social media. DM me if you're interested. And John Warren responded to the DM, to the post. And I didn't know what I was getting into. And I just said, John, I'm going to send you a Zoom video from an interview. You're probably going to have 1 or 2 a month. That's it. And I can afford to pay you this much. And he's like pumped up. I got that first video back from him. And I'm like, oh my gosh, this is so good. And that led to a couple videos, to other things, to John's working 20, 25 hours a week sometimes, and an integral part of our team. I think of Brad Martin. Hey, you want to hear a fun fact about Brad Martin? I just told you he produces the show. Brad, how long we've been together now? 2 years, 3 years? Yeah. 2.5 years. Man, Brad has fixed so many problems for me. I don't even have time to tell you. But here's a fun fact about Brad. Brad didn't like me at first. It's funny for me to even say it and hear it, but we had this conversation once. How I met Brad was at an event. He was actually working for somebody else that I was speaking for, taking video and doing pictures and all of this stuff. And I can't even remember exactly how we connected on the whole podcast thing, But to think like our first interaction, I rubbed Brad the wrong way, so I'm like, I better check myself because I don't want to do that again. But man, it's blossomed into this like great friendship, and Brad knows so many things that I don't know. He's done drone work for us and all the amazing things. But man, when I think back to this cast of characters, if you will, I would not be where I am without them. These relationships matter. So here's some action items. Audit your network. Take 10 minutes to identify the top 5 people who have supported you on your journey. Send them a quick thank you message. Express your gratitude to them. Be intentional about connection. I'm telling you, this matters. Have the conversation. Schedule a coffee. Schedule that virtual meeting with someone you admire or someone that you want to build a stronger relationship with. Go into the conversation with no agenda other than connection. Nobody likes a leech that's there just like, tell me, give me, right? Go in there with very little agenda, but make it very, very meaningful. That's how these relationships are built. That's how the whole thing blossomed with Tim Elmore. We finish up the podcast. He's just on to give me a good episode, and I'm there to help him promote his book. I didn't know Tim. It was the first time I ever met him. But as soon as we stopped hitting record, I just started asking a few questions that I felt were meaningful. We developed very quick rapport. And I said, if I'm ever in Atlanta, would you be open to lunch or coffee? And he said, yeah, I'd be happy to. Oh my gosh. Tim Elmore just said he would have lunch or coffee with me. So I made it my business to contact his admin and tell her that I was going to be in town. Here's what I didn't tell him. The only reason I was coming to town was to have lunch with Tim Elmore. I literally flew down to Atlanta, had lunch with Tim, went back to the airport, and I flew home. Why? Because Tim is a guy that has been where I want to go. He's also a good man. He has great character. Had I not made those connections, would I be writing a book? Probably. Would it be at this level? Probably not. Add value in these relationships. Think of one way that you can help someone in your network this week. Serve them. Whether it's an introduction to somebody else or a potential customer, maybe it's a piece of advice, maybe it's sharing a resource that you think they could benefit from. Focus on giving without expecting anything in return. And the last one, lesson 3, stay committed to your purpose. This is so big. Purpose is your North Star. It's it. It provides clarity in moments of distraction, and there's plenty of distraction. It provides motivation when the journey gets tough and direction when challenges arise, because the challenges are coming. The distractions are coming. There's going to be days that you don't feel like it anymore. I've had plenty of them. Purpose is your North Star. Entrepreneurship is one of the hardest and most challenging things that I have ever done in my life. Just before I left my corporate job, I had a friend that gave me some amazing advice. He encouraged me to record a video with a message to myself. He told me to express in this video the reasons I was starting my business and why it was meaningful to me. He encouraged me to say things to my future self that might be having a hard day or felt like quitting. And in the moment when he's telling me to do this, I'm like, no, this is going to be great. You kidding me? Like, I'm going to take the world by storm. I'm going to be the best entrepreneur that ever hit the face of the earth. Don't you see me? I'm built for this. Like, we're in the honeymoon phase of all this right now. But this guy had some insight. So I'm like, you know what? I'm going to do it. And so I created this video. And I'm going to tell you something. It was great advice. I can't tell you how many hard days there have been. Numerous hard days. Early on in my journey, I felt very alone. I felt sad. Why? Because I left something that I loved and I didn't have any customers. I didn't have any revenue. I lost my business community. I lost my tribe. I was trying to do it on my own. I didn't know what I was doing. Felt alone, felt isolated, felt sad. And then guess what? Just a couple months after I left my great job, the pandemic hit. And I thought it was over. I tuned in to my purpose during the pandemic, And although I wasn't creating many invoices, I locked into purpose. I locked into and I watched that video that my buddy told me to do. And I'm like, yep, that's right. I have purpose. This is why I quit. This is why I started this company. Don't let the pandemic be an excuse. Find ways to serve people, Hancher. Find ways to serve people. What do they need most right now? You know, in that moment, and finding and reminding myself what my purpose was. Do you know what happened in that moment? What happened in that moment was I started penning to paper the keynote, The State of Readiness. And I started giving that keynote to people for free, virtually 2, 3, 4 times a week, speaking to organizations about the 3 elements to get from where you are to where you want to be. I can only imagine. You know how many times I've given that keynote since the pandemic? It's amazing. It's my #1 requested keynote. If I wouldn't have tuned into purpose, my North Star, I probably would have never even created the keynote, and I might have just given up. And I have felt like a failure many times. I launched a sales training group that was a disaster. I mean, it wasn't a total disaster, but it wasn't great. I have felt like quitting so many times. And yes, I've watched that video quite a few times as well. And it has reminded me that regardless of how hard the journey gets, my purpose and vision have never changed. Have never changed. Sometimes when things got challenging, or maybe a budget was tight, I thought oftentimes about taking shortcuts or doing it different. Or maybe we don't need to spend that much. Or maybe we don't need to do that just yet. And what I learned was shortcuts, they might seem very appealing in the moment, but they rarely lead to sustained success. Aligning with your mission, it keeps you grounded, it keeps you fulfilled, and it helps you make the right decision when logical thinking isn't happening. Because there have been plenty of days that I was not thinking logically. I just want to quit this. It's too hard. I don't want to spend the money. I don't want to do it yet. Purpose drove my decision making. If you ever find yourself questioning your journey or feel like you're fighting for insanity, try this. Try this. Try reconnecting with your why. Write down your top 3 reasons for doing what you do. Keep this list visible as a daily reminder. It's going to help you in these moments when you're fighting for sanity. And consider doing the video like I did. Set purpose-driven goals. You boil it down to one. Identify one goal that aligns closely with your mission. One, just one. Break it into steps that are actionable, that you can literally work towards and commit to making progress on it. This will ensure that you're working on the things that matter most and they're tied to your purpose. And take time to reflect. Consider journaling. Maybe writing about a moment when staying true to your purpose led to a breakthrough. This will be the fuel to push you further whenever it happens again and you're tested again. Use that memory that you have whenever you stayed true to your purpose and it led to a breakthrough. Let that be your fuel for future challenges. It's going to remind you that you're on the right path. Well, there it is. 5 years in the books. 3 key lessons that have shaped my business. Quite frankly, it shaped my life over the last 5 years. So whether you're just starting or maybe you're well into your journey, embrace the uncertainty, build meaningful relationships, and stay committed to your purpose. These lessons are universal, and they can help you create a meaningful and very impactful career. I want to close by saying this too, and I mean it from the bottom of my heart. I truly appreciate you all being a part of this journey, and I challenge you to reflect on your own lessons that you've learned. I mean, look, I'm not on this journey without you all, but I want you to have this same experience. What are the lessons that you've learned? Which of these lessons that I talked about in this episode today resonates most with you? And how are you going to take action on them this week? I would love for you to message me. Maybe tag me in one of your social media posts with your thoughts. I'd love to hear how you're embracing uncertainty, building relationships, or staying committed to your purpose. I'm cheering loudly for you as you continue on this journey that you're on to reaching your fullest potential and impacting those around you. Until next time, keep learning, keep adapting, and never stop turning that pressure into potential.
The Champion Forum Podcast with Jeff Hancher. Lead, inspire, win.